My name is Sarah Nicholson. I have a master's in applied science. My research focuses on computational fluid dynamics. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about how to design for and with women. A lot of how we design for others is affected by how we think about others, and this is especially true for women. So that was one of the major things I wanted to look into in the research project. I wanted to figure out, by studying and doing some quantitative and qualitative analysis of nearly 200 personas written for reports for this course, I tried to figure out how women were thought of and how that might be affecting the design. Through the analysis, we found that it was 86% more common for positive description to be used for a man than a woman. Men were more commonly described using positive descriptors such as being intelligent and dedicated, patient, and strong. It was very obvious reading these reports that there was a preference to give a positive description to men than it was for women. The opposite was true for women. So it was 76% more common for a negative description to be used for a woman than for a man. Women were more often described as weak and lazy. They were described as nagging and being unprepared. So we can clearly start to see that there is some bias, there was some gender-based bias on how these users were being thought of and described. So this was starting to paint a picture of how the designers were thinking of women in their design process, and I really saw that this is a problem. This is a potential bias that can affect the design outcome because how we're thinking about women tended to be overly negative. Designing from these biases can lead to excluding these users from the population. For example, assuming that a woman is weak may lead a designer to feel justified in excluding her from using a heavier tool or in a job that may require strength. And in this way, she may be missed, whether or not she's actually working there and whether or not she actually needs or wants to use this tool. The other problem can be overemphasizing the characteristics which may not actually be that commonly present. The biggest example of this, I think, is the use of pink for anything designed for women. This is very obvious to a lot of people. It's called gender design. So it's this idea, this fixation of a designer on the color pink as being a preference for women based on a simplistic bias that they may have. And it's applied broadly across earplugs to gardening gloves and appliances. And it's really just an overemphasis on this one feature of our bias, which has led to an overemphasis of that feature in the design. The other problem is that we may be missing characteristics that are actually more relevant. So when we're focusing on gender and we're focusing on our perceived gender roles, we might miss the characteristics of age, ability and disability, injury and illness, and other features that are actually far more important in the design process than a gender. Most importantly, the problem with this type of bias that we found was that the users are not being well respected and they're not being well represented. This is a significant issue when you are working as a professional designer and you're wanting to communicate in a professional manner and you really want to be successful in your design criteria. It's very important to serve the society that you work for, and women are a major part of our society. So to better design for women, it's really important that we look at those initial biases on how we think about women when we're designing, to focus on researching more, really to find accurate descriptions of capabilities and disabilities, limitations and goals, and also to look beyond sex and gender and to try and figure out what else is more important when we're doing this design process. One really easy way to design for women is to actually let women design for themselves, and this applies across groups. Having those groups represented in the decision-making process means that the end product is more likely to address their needs. Having more representation of diverse people allows us to have more diverse design and to get the design a little bit more correct, a little bit more on the nose for what people really want. It's easiest to do it when you can think of yourself or your own personal experiences. It really makes it easy. So this is the quickest, easiest tip to get better design for women, is to let women design for themselves. So where are women in design? There is low representation of women across engineering, as we often experience, especially in mechanical, software and computer engineering, but also in our professors and in the full-time professors who are teaching us. When it comes to being in the workforce, in the licensed profession, there are only 12% of the licensed engineers in Canada that are women. So there's not a lot of representation of women, and this certainly doesn't represent the population. So to address this, many professional engineering associations have stated a goal to achieve 30% representation of women by the year 2030 in these engineering design positions. This means that there already are some women in engineering, some women doing design for themselves, and there is expected to be more. We're not going away. There's likely going to be more and more of us doing this work, which is awesome. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can make that work easier. So we need to look at how the conditions for work actually are for those women that are here right now. It's not that good. In a study in Canada, it found that 1 in 2 engineering women felt disrespected on the job. 1 in 4 of them experienced discrimination, harassment, or bullying, and 1 in 3 were getting paid less than men. In America, the engineering profession is the profession with the highest dropout rate of women. So 40% of women who had already earned their degrees left the field completely. And most of the reasoning for this is because 52% of these licensed engineers who were women said that they had experienced sexual harassment while at work. When we think of what it takes to be an engineer, it's really about overcoming the forces of the difficulties of the job. The difficulties of the job are great, so we require a lot of motivation, effort, and ability in order to achieve the career of being an engineer. But for those of us who are different, there can be some added difficulties. So what we're talking about here is a case of added forces. When we want to do our job as someone who may be a minority at our workplace or in our school, we're not just facing the challenges of that job. We have to also overcome many different challenges, and these challenges are different for everyone, and they're not just limited to women. Some of these are the exclusion from dominant culture. So knowing that you stick out, knowing that you're different, that you're part of a smaller percentage, can make your everyday work just a little bit harder. We may feel intersectional challenges, issues beyond just gender, issues of race, social economic status, of ability, of gender orientation, and sexual preference. We also feel social and cultural norms, depending on who we are and who we believe we should be. As well, there is well-researched and well-tracked misogyny, violence, sexism, stalking, harassment, assault, etc. for women at work and at school in this field. These all add up to increasing difficulties and really make it harder to do the work of engineering. The goal is to reduce those extra challenges to really allow everyone to have the opportunity to be a good designer and to go to work and to contribute to society through design and through engineering. So that's my next tip. It's how to design with women, not just for them, because this is really how we can start to include women across the entire design stage. Again, it goes back to how we think about women, because this is really affecting our beliefs and our actions in our everyday work. So I did some research and I just looked at the first few meme Instagram pages for engineering to try and see what is the dominant thoughts about women in engineering through the meme lens, so more of our social culture in engineering. Like the messages about women in the engineering design reports, the messages about women from their colleagues are also negative. So there is a perception that women in engineering are ugly and unlikable, or that they are non-existent and they don't belong. And also there is a strong sexualization and objectification of these women in engineering. So talking about them only as potential romantic partners or judging them based on their appearances. When we start to address this problem, we actually get a lot of really good information from the reaction in engineering to how the culture of engineering handles women and handles the topic of women in engineering. So if you look on any of the articles or presentations about what I'm talking about right now, you'll often find in the comments section a lot of the common reactions that some people have when we talk about including women in engineering. What I find the most common is that women just aren't here because we don't want to be, we don't enjoy it, or we are biologically incapable of it. Across different environments, we see repetitions of these same negative stereotypes. So this idea that a woman at work is a potential mate because there's not very many women around, or the idea that women are biologically incapable or inferior, or they're just generally quite bad at being an engineer. Needless to say, this makes the job harder. When these beliefs about women leak out into our behavior and actions towards women while they are at work and when we interact with them, some women may experience direct harassment and hostility when they're at work based on these views about women. So these are some examples of some comments of sexualization of women, of believing that women are incapable of achieving the things that they achieve, and also just a general dislike of women. These I don't need to reference because these were all said directly to me while I was doing my studies and while I was working. This is quite a challenge to overcome. Regardless of the awards and achievements that I got, regardless of the effort that I put into my schooling, these kinds of challenges really made me second guess whether or not this career was right for me. But the good news is that engineering is a changing field. We are inherent researchers because we always have to be learning new things. We always have to be inventing, learning new software, and applying new solutions. So this problem of our culture of engineering not addressing women very well, not being very positive in our interactions with them, is something that we can overcome. We can learn about it and we can figure it out. I am very hopeful. I believe that this design skill is something that we can cultivate and that it will lead to improving our engineering skills as a whole and improving the field as well. So I want to challenge all of us because our field requires us to be very on top of technology. It requires us to change a lot. It requires us to take in a lot of new complex knowledge and to constantly be updating. That should mean that we can handle this challenge of updating our culture in engineering to be more inclusive and to be more diverse. I really think that this is something that we can achieve, and I think it's a necessary design skill as well. I think it really makes better engineers who can work better with a whole range of people, and that will lead to a more successful career and more successful design. Some of the ways I think designing with more respect for our women engineers can help design process is by including new users in the design population. So as soon as we include new people in the design team, we are automatically learning about more types of people, more ways of being, and we can expand our markets and expand our focus in our user group to a greater range of people and really reach our solutions further. As well, we can start to discover new design criteria we may not have thought of before, new issues that haven't been solved. This is very exciting because it leads to a lot of creativity and innovation. And also, we can begin to focus on characteristics that are actually more dominant and more relevant. Working better with women can help us identify new problems that we didn't know existed and start to address some issues that may have been unaddressed for a very long time. But the main reason why it matters to work well with women in the design process is that you're putting representation and respect into your design process. By respecting your fellow designer, it will be easier for you to respect the user, and that will come throughout your design process and throughout your final product. So I believe that working well with women can really improve our design skills, and I also think that it's possible. And working in teams that are respectful makes the whole project a lot more fun, and it makes the outcome more easily achieved. We can spend less time on interpersonal conflicts, and we can have everyone on the team comfortable to be engaged in the design process and really to put their efforts in at work when they feel more comfortable and respected at work. So the productivity of your team when you work well with women increases, and I also think that the design quality increases as well. So I really believe that good design comes from working well with other people. So here are some quick tips on how to work better with women. Most importantly, don't make judgments or assumptions without evidence. Don't use your perception of women or perception of people in general to affect how you act with someone without actually learning about who they are and what they are capable of. It's also important not to treat all women as the same. The next thing I would say is not to sexualize your colleagues or not to objectify them. We are all here at work, we are trying to get our grades, we're trying to get our tasks done, and we're trying to go home. It's not impossible to find partners and relationships and to have friendships and to have casual interactions at school and in work. But what I want to say is that you shouldn't go into every interaction with a woman in engineering assuming that she is or could be your girlfriend. Thinking of women as potential partners really changes how we interact with each other at work. It's better to think of each other as colleagues and remain professional. If you are wanting to use contact information that you got through work, for example, in a business card or in a WhatsApp phone number or something like this, I really suggest that you ask first before you use this to reach out for any other type of relationship. That will make it a lot more comfortable, and it'll make those women able to network the same as men do without feeling this constant expectation that it's going to be used as a way to try and engage them or objectify them. And finally, I would say don't be a gatekeeper. We can't assume that we know what it takes to be an engineer, especially while we are still discovering it for ourselves. Luckily, we have professors and TAs and lots of forms in order to sift through and judge and create criteria and grades. It's not always up to us to decide whether or not our peers are worthy of being engineers. And it's certainly not up to us to decide what type of person is allowed to be an engineer and what type of person is capable of being an engineer. Once we stop being gatekeepers and the doors are more open, I'm sure that we will see that there are a whole wide range of people who like this field and who want to be here. It's just that the gates have been keeping it closed and making it very difficult for them to enter. Being consistent, being professional, and respectful in your treatment of others really makes a difference and makes the entire project feel different, and it removes a lot of the conflict that would take away from the actual project. And you're able to really just design. Treat everyone as equal. Everyone has something that you can learn from them, and it's also important to remember that we all overcame great personal challenges and continue to overcome great personal challenges that are often unseen in order to be engineers. So we have proven ourselves, and we all are excellent in our skill and ability to be here. We deserve to be here, and we deserve to all be treated equally. This means that we believe that the women that are in our field deserve to be there and that they have the technical skills required to be there. Also important to stand up for your colleagues when you witness harassment. Having one person against an issue makes it nearly impossible to solve, but having multiple people makes it a much more simple issue. It makes it easier to handle when we can discuss these problems openly together, and also it will help to include that person and prevent them from feeling like they are alone in dealing with their issues and with their conflicts. You can really do a lot by supporting your colleagues. Once these issues are spoken about, they stop being hidden, and we can really start to address them and move on. We can get back to the things that we all love to do. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really happy to be here giving this guest lecture. And thank you to your professors for giving me the time to talk about this issue, which is so important to me.